What would you do for $75 million? This woman signed a contract to marry a ruthless billionaire for 2 years. No love. Just business. But by the end, she'll wish she never fell for him. Hit like right now if you're ready for this and subscribe because you won't believe how this ends. The champagne glass shattered against the marble floor, silencing the entire ballroom. Elena Rossi stood frozen, her hands still trembling from the impact, as 300 pairs of eyes turned toward her. Across the wreckage of crystal and golden liquid, Dominic Zhao remained perfectly still in his chair, his expression unreadable behind those cold, calculating eyes that had built empires and destroyed competitors without mercy. Pathetic, he said, his voice cutting through the silence like a blade through silk. Every single one of you. Elena watched as the other candidates, 20 women handpicked from elite families across 3 continents, shifted uncomfortably in their designer gowns. They had all come here tonight to the Zhao family estate for the same reason, answering the same cryptic invitation that promised an opportunity of a lifetime. Now they understood. They were being auditioned like performers at a cattle call, and the man conducting this humiliating spectacle was Dominic Zhao himself, heir to the Zhao Corporation, a multinational conglomerate worth over $200 billion. My son, an older man's voice boomed from the shadows near the grand staircase. This is the 7th group this month. The board is losing patience. Dominic's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Then perhaps, father, you should have raised a son who cared about the board's patience. Elena felt her heart hammering against her ribs. She hadn't meant to throw the glass. She'd been holding it when the woman beside her had whispered something cruel about Elena's shoes, last season's collection purchased on sale, and Elena's fingers had simply opened. The glass had fallen, bounced off the serving table, and careened directly toward Dominic Zhao's polished Italian leather shoes. You, Dominic said, his eyes finally focusing on Elena with an intensity that made her skin prickle. The clumsy one. Come here. Every instinct screamed at Elena to run. Instead, she forced her legs to move forward, her cheap heels clicking against the marble with each step. The other women parted like a sea, grateful the attention had shifted away from them. When Elena stopped 3 feet from his chair, close enough to smell his cologne, something dark and expensive, Dominic leaned forward. What's your name? Elena Rossi, she managed, hating how her voice wavered. And why are you here, Elena Rossi? The truth would sound desperate. The truth was that her younger brother Marco needed a kidney transplant that cost more than their family would earn in 5 lifetimes. The truth was that the invitation had come with a discreet notation suggesting that the chosen candidate would receive a financial settlement substantial enough to solve any problem. The truth was that Elena had 3 months to find the money before Marco's name would be removed from the transplant list permanently. Same reason as everyone else, she said instead. Opportunity. Something flickered in Dominic's expression, almost like interest. Everyone else came because their families want access to Zhao resources, their commodities being traded by ambitious parents. But you came alone, didn't you? No family delegation. No prepared speech about bloodlines and merger potential. Elena lifted her chin. My family doesn't know I'm here. Interesting. Dominic stood, and Elena had to crane her neck to maintain eye contact. He was taller than she'd expected, broader through the shoulders. Father, clear the room. I've made my decision. The ballroom erupted in protests. Women who'd been silent moments ago suddenly found their voices, arguing about fairness and proper procedure. Dominic's father, Chairman Zhao, descended the stairs with measured steps, his expression thunderous. Dominic, be reasonable. Miss Chen's family controls half the rare earth mineral deposits in. I don't care, Dominic interrupted, never taking his eyes off Elena. This one will do. This one doesn't even come from money. Look at her dress, her shoes. She's nobody. Exactly. Dominic's smile was sharp enough to draw blood. She's nobody, which means she wants something badly enough to walk into this circus. That desperation makes her controllable. The others would be negotiating terms before the ink dried on the marriage license. Marriage license. The words hit Elena like a physical blow. She'd known the position involved some kind of long-term arrangement, but hearing it stated so bluntly made the reality crash down around her. I need to think about this, Elena said, taking a step backward. Dominic's hand shot out, wrapping around her wrist with surprising gentleness. No, you don't. You need money urgently. I need a wife who won't interfere with business operations. We sign a contract, you fulfill your obligations for 2 years, and when it ends, you walk away with $50 million. $50 million. More than enough for Marco's transplant, for her parents' mortgage, for her own student loans. More than enough to change everything. What obligations? Elena forced herself to ask. Public appearances. Social events. Maintaining the image of a functional marriage. Living in my home. Sharing my bed when necessary for appearances. His thumb traced a small circle on the inside of her wrist, and Elena's pulse jumped traitorously. I'm not asking for love, Miss Rossi. I'm offering a business transaction. And if I refuse? Then you leave here tonight with nothing, and whatever brought you here desperate enough to endure this humiliation remains unsolved. Your choice. Elena looked around the ballroom. Chairman Zhao watched her with poorly concealed disdain. The other candidates whispered behind their hands, their expressions ranging from pity to contempt. Security guards stood by every exit, reminding her that this wasn't just a mansion, it was a fortress. 75 million, Elena heard herself say. And I want it in writing that I can visit my family whenever I want during those 2 years. Dominic's eyebrows rose fractionally. Then he laughed, a genuine sound that seemed to surprise even him. 75 million. Bold. I like that. He released her wrist and extended his hand formally. Done. We sign the contracts tomorrow morning. Be here at 9. Elena shook his hand, sealing her fate with that single gesture. His palm was warm, his grip firm but not crushing. When he released her, she felt suddenly unmoored, as if she just stepped off a cliff and was waiting to discover whether she'd fall or fly. The other candidates were ushered out by security, their protests fading as they disappeared into the night. Chairman Zhao approached his son with barely restrained fury. You're making a mistake. This girl is nobody. She has no connections, no influence, nothing to offer the family. She offered to negotiate, Dominic replied calmly. That's more backbone than any of the others showed. Besides, father, you're the one who insisted I marry before my 30th birthday to satisfy the board's concerns about stability. I'm following your directive. The fact that you don't approve of my choice is irrelevant. The board expects a wife. They'll get one. Now if you'll excuse me, I need to have my attorneys prepare the contracts. Dominic turned back to Elena, who'd remained frozen in place, trying to process everything. You should go home, Miss Rossi. Get some rest. Tomorrow your life changes completely. Elena found her voice again. Why me? Really? Dominic studied her for a long moment, and she had the unsettling sensation of being analyzed like a business proposition. Every weakness and strength catalogued and assessed. Because you're afraid but you're here anyway, he finally said. Because you negotiated when you had no leverage. Because you're desperate enough to be useful and proud enough to be interesting. That's more than I expected to find tonight. He walked away without another word, leaving Elena standing alone in the vast ballroom with only her thundering heartbeat and the shattered champagne glass for company. The next morning arrived too quickly. Elena had barely slept, her mind racing through scenarios, consequences, escape plans. But when dawn broke through her apartment window, illuminating the medical bills stacked on her desk and the photo of Marco's too-thin face smiling up at her, she knew there was no escape plan. There was only forward. The Zhao estate looked different in daylight. Less menacing, more magnificent. The security guard at the gate checked her identification 3 times before allowing her entry. A butler whose name she immediately forgot escorted her through hallways lined with art that belonged in museums, past rooms that could have housed her entire apartment building, until they reached a study where Dominic sat behind a desk that probably cost more than a car. Miss Rossi, he greeted without looking up from the document he was reading. Punctual. Good. My attorney has prepared the contracts. You should read them carefully before signing. Elena sat in the leather chair across from him and accepted the thick stack of papers from a severe-looking woman in a gray suit who'd materialized from nowhere. The first page made her stomach drop. Prenuptial agreement. Marriage contract. Terms of dissolution. The legal language was dense and intimidating, but Elena forced herself to read every word. Living arrangements. She would reside in Dominic's primary residence, a penthouse apartment in the city, for the duration of the contract. Separate bedrooms unless otherwise required. Public appearances. Minimum of 15 major events per year. Wardrobe provided, behavior coached. Physical intimacy. Required for maintaining public perception of genuine marriage, frequency and nature to be negotiated privately. Financial compensation. $75 million paid in full upon successful completion of 2-year term, with penalties for early termination due to breach of contract. The physical intimacy clause, Elena said, her mouth dry. It's vague. Dominic finally looked up, and the intensity of his gaze made her squirm. Deliberately so. I'm not interested in forcing anything, but if we attend an event together, you'll need to act like you want to be there. Touch my arm. Laugh at my jokes. Look at me like I'm not repulsive to you. Can you manage that? And if photographers catch us leaving together? If people expect more? Then we'll handle it. I'm not a monster, Miss Rossi. I'm a businessman who needs a wife for professional reasons, not personal ones. Your virtue, such as it is, remains yours unless you decide otherwise. Elena's cheeks burned at the casual dismissal. Such as it is? You're 26 years old and you came to a marriage auction. I'm not judging. I'm simply noting that you're clearly not some sheltered innocent who'll collapse into hysterics at the mention of adult relationships. He wasn't wrong, but the assumption still stung. Elena had dated, had relationships, but nothing serious enough to warrant the kind of intimacy this contract implied. The thought of pretending to be in love with this cold, calculating man made her skin crawl and her pulse race in equal measure. I need the money before the wedding, Elena said, shifting the conversation to safer ground. My brother needs surgery and… No. The flat refusal shocked her. But you agreed. I agreed to $75 million upon completion of the contract. That remains unchanged. However, Dominic leaned back in his chair, steepling his fingers. I'm not completely heartless. What does your brother need? Elena hesitated, then decided she had nothing left to lose. Kidney transplant. He's been on the list for 2 years, but we can't afford the surgery and postoperative care. He has maybe 3 months before he's removed from the list permanently. Dominic picked up his phone and dialed. Dr. Chun? Dominic Zhao. I need you to arrange a priority transplant evaluation for… He glanced at Elena. Marco Rossi, she whispered. Marco Rossi. Family member of my fiancé. Full coverage, best team available, no expense spared. Yes, immediately. Thank you. He ended the call and returned his attention to Elena, who was staring at him in shock. My family owns 3 hospitals. Your brother will receive the transplant within the month, assuming he's medically approved. That should suffice until you receive your full payment. Elena felt tears burning behind her eyes and blinked them back furiously. Why would you do that? Because I need you focused on your obligations, not distracted by family emergencies. Consider it an investment in our arrangement's success. Dominic pushed the contract toward her. Sign, Miss Rossi. Or walk away. Decide now. Elena picked up the pen, her hand shaking slightly. She thought of Marco, of her parents' faces when she told them help was coming, of the weight that had been crushing her chest for 2 years finally lifting. She thought of Dominic's cold eyes and colder words, of 2 years pretending to love a man who saw her as a business expense. She signed her name on the bottom line. Excellent, Dominic said, countersigning with a flourish. We'll marry in 2 weeks. Small ceremony, immediate family only. My assistant will coordinate your schedule for dress fittings, etiquette coaching, and media training. You'll move into the penthouse this weekend. Any questions? Elena had 1,000 questions. Instead she asked, do you always get what you want? Dominic's smile was sharp and humorless. Always, Miss Rossi. The sooner you accept that, the easier these 2 years will be for both of us. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of preparation that felt more like military training than wedding planning. Elena was measured and fitted for dresses that cost more than her annual salary. She sat through hours of instruction on which fork to use at formal dinners, how to walk in heels without wobbling, how to smile for cameras without looking terrified. A stylist transformed her appearance, cutting and coloring her hair, teaching her makeup techniques, filling her new closet with clothes she would never have chosen for herself. Through it all, she saw Dominic exactly 3 times. Once for an awkward dinner where photographers captured them laughing together, though Elena couldn't remember what had been funny. Once for a jewelry selection, where he'd placed a diamond engagement ring on her finger that weighed heavily enough to remind her constantly of her bargain. And once for a contract review with both their attorneys present, where every detail was explained in excruciating legal terminology that made Elena's head spin. Marco's surgery was scheduled, the hospital bills handled before Elena even saw them. Her parents asked questions she couldn't answer, suspicious of her sudden good fortune but too relieved about Marco's treatment to push too hard. Elena told them she'd received a grant, a scholarship, anything but the truth. The wedding itself was surreal. Elena walked down an aisle in a dress that cost more than her parents' house, toward a man she'd known for exactly 14 days, in front of 50 strangers who represented the Zhao family's closest business associates and political allies. Her own family wasn't there. She'd claimed it was too sudden, too small, promised them a celebration later that would never come. Dominic waited at the altar in a black suit that fit him like a second skin, his expression unreadable. When Elena reached him, he took her hand with practiced ease, his thumb brushing over her knuckles in a gesture that might have seemed affectionate to observers but felt like a reminder of ownership to her. The officiant spoke words Elena barely heard. She repeated her vows like an actress reciting lines. When Dominic slid the wedding band onto her finger, his eyes met hers with something that might have been triumph or might have been warning. "You may kiss the bride." Dominic's hand cupped her face with surprising gentleness, tilting her head up. His lips met hers softly at first, almost questioning, before the kiss deepened into something that made Elena's knees weaken and her pulse race. It was nothing like the cold, clinical relationship she'd expected. It was heat and pressure and a shocking jolt of desire that made her forget, just for a moment, that this was all pretend. When he pulled back, his eyes were darker than before, his breathing slightly uneven. "Well," he murmured, quiet enough that only she could hear. "That was unexpected." Elena couldn't find words. She simply nodded as applause erupted around them, as Dominic tucked her hand into his arm and led her back down the aisle as his wife, as cameras flashed and captured the moment that would later appear in business journals and society pages worldwide. The reception was torture. Elena smiled until her face ached, made small talk with strangers who assessed her like livestock, danced with Dominic while maintaining exactly the right amount of distance to seem intimate without being inappropriate. Through it all, she felt his presence like electricity, heightening every nerve ending, making her hyper-aware of every casual touch and calculated smile. "You're doing well," Dominic said during their third dance, his hand warm against the small of her back. "Natural performer." "I'm terrified," Elena admitted, too exhausted to lie. "I know. Your pulse is racing. I can feel it." His thumb pressed gently against her wrist where their hands met. "But no one else knows. That's what matters. Is this what the next 2 years look like? Pretending constantly? Would you prefer I be honest?" Dominic's voice dropped lower, intimate despite the crowd around them. "Should I tell you that you look beautiful tonight? That watching you walk toward me in that dress made something in my chest tighten uncomfortably? That kissing you was the first genuine impulse I've had in months." Elena's breath caught. Don't what? Don't complicate our simple business arrangement with inconvenient truths." His smile was bitter. "Too late, Mrs. Zhao. I think we complicated it the moment you threw that champagne glass." The song ended, saving Elena from having to respond. They were immediately separated by well-wishers and business associates eager to congratulate the groom and assess his new wife. Elena endured another hour of scrutiny before Dominic finally extracted them both, claiming exhaustion. The drive to the penthouse was silent. Elena watched the city lights blur past the car window, trying not to think about what came next, about sharing a home with a stranger who just admitted to feeling something beyond their contractual obligation, trying not to think about how her own traitorous body had responded to that kiss. The penthouse was minimalist and masculine, all clean lines and dark colors, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the glittering cityscape. A housekeeper showed Elena to her bedroom, separate from Dominic's as promised, and disappeared discreetly. Elena stood in the center of the enormous space, still wearing her wedding dress, feeling utterly lost. A knock on the door made her jump. Dominic entered without waiting for permission, carrying 2 glasses of whiskey. He'd removed his jacket and tie, unbuttoned his collar, and somehow looked even more dangerous half undressed. "Thought you might need this," he said, offering her a glass. Elena accepted it, grateful for something to do with her shaking hands. The whiskey burned going down, but the warmth spreading through her chest was welcome. "Thank you. For today. For all of it. Don't thank me. You're fulfilling your end of the bargain." Dominic moved to the windows, staring out at the view with his back to her. "Your brother's surgery went well, by the way. Dr. Chan called during the reception. Marco's recovery looks promising." Fresh tears threatened, but Elena blinked them back. "I don't know how to repay you for that. You already are. 2 years, Mrs. Zhao. That's the price." He turned to face her, his expression unreadable in the dim light. "I should let you rest. We have a charity gala tomorrow night. First public appearance as a married couple." He moved toward the door, but Elena's voice stopped him. "Dominic? Earlier what you said about complications. Did you mean it?" He paused, his hand on the doorframe, his profile sharp against the hallway light. "I never say things I don't mean, Elena. That's the problem. I meant every word, which means the next 2 years are going to be significantly more difficult than I anticipated." Then he was gone, leaving Elena alone with her whiskey and her racing thoughts and the unsettling realization that her carefully constructed emotional walls were already beginning to crumble. She'd signed a contract promising 2 years of her life to a stranger. She hadn't anticipated that the stranger might become something more. She hadn't anticipated that the pretense might start feeling dangerously real. The next 2 months tested every limit Elena thought she had. The public appearances were exhausting, always on display, always being judged, always hyper-aware of Dominic beside her with his hand on her back or his arm around her waist. The media loved them, dubbing them the year's most unexpected power couple, speculating endlessly about their whirlwind romance. In private, things were more complicated. They shared meals in tense silence. They occupied the same space like polite strangers. Dominic worked 18-hour days, leaving before Elena woke and returning after she'd gone to bed. When they did interact, the air crackled with unspoken tension, with the memory of that kiss at their wedding, with all the things they'd agreed not to want from each other. Then came the night of the Children's Hospital fundraiser, the biggest charity event of the season. Elena wore a silver dress that Dominic had personally selected, her hair swept up to expose her neck and shoulders. When she emerged from her room, Dominic's eyes darkened with unmistakable hunger before he schooled his expression back to neutrality. "Beautiful," he said simply, offering his arm. The fundraiser was held in the same ballroom where they'd first met. Elena couldn't help remembering that night, how terrified and desperate she'd been, how she'd thrown that glass and sealed her fate. Now she moved through the crowd with practiced ease, charming donors and posing for photographs, playing her role perfectly. Until she saw the woman. She was stunning with perfect features and designer everything, and she approached Dominic with the confidence of someone who'd touched him intimately and knew she could again. "Dominic, darling," she purred, completely ignoring Elena's presence. "It's been too long." Dominic's expression went arctic. "Victoria, I didn't realize you'd be here. I wouldn't miss it. Especially not when I heard about your unexpected marriage." Victoria's eyes finally slid to Elena with thinly veiled contempt. "How quaint. You always did enjoy your charity cases." Elena felt the blood drain from her face. Before she could respond, Dominic's arm wrapped around her waist, pulling her tight against his side. "Careful, Victoria. That's my wife you're insulting." "Wife?" Victoria laughed, the sound sharp and mocking. "Please. We both know what this is. A business arrangement. Just like your marriage to Sophia was before she realized you were incapable of actual human emotion and left you." Dominic's entire body went rigid. Elena felt the tension rolling off him in waves, saw the muscle jumping in his jaw. Without thinking, she pressed her hand against his chest, over his heart. "If you'll excuse us," Elena said coolly, meeting Victoria's gaze without flinching. "My husband and I were just leaving." She guided Dominic away from Victoria's toxic presence, through the crowd. out onto the balcony where the night air was cool and the noise faded to a murmur. Dominic's hands gripped the balcony railing so tightly his knuckles went white. "I'm sorry," Elena said quietly. "I didn't know about Sophia." Dominic's voice was flat, emotionless. "My first wife. Victoria's right, it was a business arrangement that ended badly. Sophia thought she could change me, make me into something softer. When she realized I was exactly who I appeared to be, she left. That was 3 years ago." Elena processed this information, understanding suddenly clicking into place. "That's why your father insisted you remarry. Because Sophia's departure made you look unstable. Among other things." Dominic finally turned to face her, and the vulnerability in his eyes stole Elena's breath. "She wasn't wrong, you know. I am exactly what Victoria said. Incapable of the kind of emotion normal people feel. I'm good at business, at strategy, at control. But relationships, connection, I'm fundamentally broken in that regard." "I don't believe that," Elena said, surprising herself with the conviction in her voice. "Why not? You've seen how I operate. Everything's transactional. Even this." He gestured between them. "Even us. Maybe that's what you tell yourself. But the man who arranged my brother's surgery without being asked isn't broken. The man who selected this dress because he knew I'd feel beautiful in it isn't incapable of consideration. The man whose heart is racing under my hand right now isn't emotionless." Dominic stared at her, something shifting in his expression. Then before Elena could process what was happening, he was kissing her. Not the practiced performance from their wedding, but something raw and desperate, his hands tangling in her carefully styled hair, her back pressed against the balcony door. Elena kissed him back with equal desperation, months of tension finally breaking free. His mouth tasted like whiskey and something darker, and when his teeth scraped against her bottom lip, she gasped, allowing him deeper access. The kiss was consuming, overwhelming, everything she'd been trying not to want. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Dominic rested his forehead against hers. "We can't do this," he said, but his hands remained on her waist, holding her close. "Why not?" "Because in 22 months you're going to walk away with your $75 million and your freedom. Because getting attached makes that impossible. Because I told you I'm broken and I meant it, Elena. Eventually I'll hurt you. It's what I do. What if I'm willing to risk it?" Dominic's laugh was pained. "You shouldn't be. You should keep your walls up, count down the days and collect your payment. That's the smart play." "I'm tired of being smart," Elena admitted. "I'm tired of pretending this is just business when every time you touch me, I feel like I'm burning up from the inside. I'm tired of sleeping alone in that enormous bed while you're right down the hall, probably feeling the same thing." Something fierce and possessive flashed in Dominic's eyes. "You have no idea what I feel. The things I want to do to you. The things I've imagined in excruciating detail while lying in that bed you mentioned. Knowing you're so close and completely off limits." Elena's pulse hammered. "Who says I'm off limits? Our contract. Our arrangement. Common sense." But Dominic's grip on her waist tightened, contradicting his words. "Elena, if we cross this line, everything changes. The clarity we have now, the boundaries, they'll disappear. And when the 2 years end, we'll deal with that when it comes. But right now, tonight, I don't want to be your business arrangement. I want to be your wife." Dominic made a sound low in his throat, something between a growl and a surrender, and then he was kissing her again, harder this time, more demanding. Elena responded with equal hunger, her hands sliding under his jacket, feeling the heat of his skin through his shirt, the rapid thunder of his heartbeat matching her own. They stayed on that balcony until the night air grew cold and their lips were swollen and Elena's carefully styled hair was a disaster. When they finally returned to the fundraiser, the party was winding down, the crowd thinning. Victoria watched them enter with knowing eyes and a bitter smile, but Elena didn't care anymore. That night, in the penthouse, Dominic walked Elena to her bedroom door as he always did. But this time, when he turned to leave, Elena caught his hand. "Stay," she said simply. Dominic's eyes searched hers, looking for doubt or hesitation. Finding none, he followed her inside, closing the door behind them with quiet finality. What happened next was tender and intense and completely demolished any pretense that their relationship was purely contractual. Elena discovered that beneath Dominic's cold exterior lived someone capable of devastating passion, of careful attention to her pleasure, of whispered confessions in the darkness that revealed depths she hadn't imagined. Afterward, wrapped in expensive sheets with Dominic's steady breathing warm against her neck, Elena realized she'd made a terrible mistake. Not in sleeping with him. That had been inevitable from the moment their lips first met. No, her mistake was assuming she could keep her heart uninvolved. Somewhere between that first champagne glass and tonight, between the public performances and private moments, she'd fallen in love with the man who'd bought her like a commodity, and she had no idea what she was going to do about it. The months that followed were the happiest and most terrifying of Elena's life. She and Dominic developed routines, breakfast together when his schedule allowed, evenings that ended in his bed more often than not, quiet moments stolen between the constant demands of his business empire and their public obligations. He was still difficult, still controlling, still fundamentally incapable of expressing emotion in conventional ways. But Elena learned to read him, to see the care in his actions even when his words remained guarded. Marco's recovery progressed beautifully. Elena visited him weekly, watching color return to his face, seeing his strength rebuild. Her parents still didn't know the truth about her marriage, and the deception weighed on her. But what could she say? That she'd sold herself for their son's life? That she'd fallen in love with her buyer? 6 months into their contract, everything fell apart. Elena returned to the penthouse early from a charity luncheon to find Dominic in his study with his attorney and several grim-faced executives. The moment she entered, the conversation stopped. "What's wrong?" Elena asked, fear prickling up her spine. Dominic's expression was carved from stone. "Board meeting. There's been a development." The attorney, the same severe woman who'd prepared their contracts, spoke carefully. "Mrs. Zhao, certain board members have raised concerns about the validity of your marriage. They're calling for an independent investigation into whether the relationship is genuine or simply a contractual arrangement designed to satisfy inheritance requirements." Elena's blood went cold. "Can they do that?" "They can do anything they want," Dominic said bitterly. "They control enough voting shares to force my hand. If they prove the marriage is fake, I lose my position as CEO. The company passes to my cousin, who'll dismantle everything I've built." "But it's not fake," Elena protested. "We're really married. We live together. She stopped, her cheeks flushing, but everyone in the room knew what she'd been about to say. The attorney's expression softened fractionally. "Nevertheless, the perception exists. Victoria Chun filed a complaint suggesting the marriage was arranged purely for business purposes. She provided evidence. Photographs of the two of you at your first meeting before the wedding. Testimony from other candidates who were present that night. Victoria, of course, the woman Dominic had dismissed at the fundraiser, who'd looked at Elena with such venom. This was revenge, pure and calculated. What do we do?" Elena asked. The executives exchanged glances. One cleared his throat. "The board is requesting a meeting with both of you. They want to interview Mrs. Zhao separately, assess the relationship's authenticity. If they're not satisfied, they'll force a divorce," Dominic finished flatly. "And Elena will forfeit her contract payment for failing to fulfill the terms of our arrangement." The words hit Elena like a slap. After everything, after opening herself to him, after falling in love, he still viewed this through the lens of their contract. Still saw her payment as the primary concern rather than their relationship itself. "I see," Elena said quietly. "When is this meeting?" "Tomorrow morning. 9 o'clock. The attorney stood, gathering her materials. "I'd suggest you both prepare thoroughly. The board will ask invasive questions about the most intimate aspects of your marriage. You'll need to present a united front." After the executives left, Elena and Dominic remained in tense silence. Finally, Elena spoke. "You still think of this as a contract? Even after everything? What else would I think of it as?" Dominic's voice was carefully neutral, but Elena saw the tension in his shoulders, the way he avoided her eyes. "As a marriage, as a relationship, as something real. It's real enough for the board's purposes, which is what matters right now." Dominic moved to pour himself a drink, his movements precise and controlled. "We need to focus on the interview. on providing consistent answers that satisfy their concerns. Consistent answers, Elena repeated, something cold and hard settling in her chest. Like rehearsing for a performance. Because that's all this has ever been to you, hasn't it? A performance. Elena. No, I need to hear you say it. These past 6 months, every moment we've shared. Was any of it real to you? Or was it all just part of maintaining the illusion? Dominic set down his glass with deliberate care. When he finally met her eyes, his expression was shuttered, unreadable. Does it matter? We had an agreement. 2 years. $75 million. Nothing's changed. Everything's changed. Elena's voice cracked despite her efforts to remain calm. I've changed. I fell in love with you, Dominic. Somewhere between pretending and performing, it became real for me. And I hoped it had become real for you too. The silence that followed was deafening. Dominic stared at her, something flickering in his eyes, surprise, fear, maybe even hope, before his walls slammed back into place. You shouldn't have done that, he said quietly. I warned you. I told you exactly what I was. You told me you were broken. But broken things can heal if you let them. If you're brave enough to try. I'm not brave. I'm a coward who hides behind contracts and transactions because they're safe. Because they can't hurt me when they end. Dominic's voice roughened. You were supposed to be safe, Elena. You were supposed to take the money and leave. You weren't supposed to become someone I couldn't imagine losing. Elena's breath caught. Then don't lose me. Tell the board the truth. Tell them we started as a contract but became something more. Tell them you love me. I can't. Can't or won't. Both. Neither. I don't know. Dominic ran his hands through his hair, his composure finally cracking. I don't know how to do this, Elena. I don't know how to be what you need. Every relationship I've ever had has ended in failure, because I'm fundamentally incapable of. Of what? Of feeling? You feel things, Dominic. I see it every time you look at me, every time you touch me. You're just too terrified to admit it. Maybe I am. Maybe that terror is the smartest thing about me. Dominic moved toward her, his eyes dark with emotion. Because admitting I love you means admitting I need you. And needing someone gives them the power to destroy me. I've built my entire life around never being vulnerable, never being at someone else's mercy. And then you walked into that ballroom and threw a champagne glass and dismantled every defense I had. Elena felt tears sliding down her cheeks. Loving someone isn't weakness, Dominic. It's the bravest thing you can do. Then I'm not brave enough. His voice broke on the words. I'm sorry, Elena. I'm so sorry. But I can't give you what you're asking for. I can't be the man you deserve. You already are that man. You just won't let yourself believe it. Dominic reached out as if to touch her face, then let his hand drop. Get some rest. Tomorrow's going to be difficult. We need to present a united front, remember? That's what matters now. He left the study, left Elena standing there with her shattered heart, and the devastating realization that loving someone who refused to love themselves was an impossible task. She'd known the risks when she signed that contract. She'd known Dominic came with warnings and complications. But knowing and experiencing were vastly different things, and the pain blooming in her chest felt like it might consume her entirely. That night, Elena slept alone in her bedroom for the first time in months. The bed felt too large, too cold, too empty. She lay awake until dawn, preparing herself for the interview that could end everything, wondering if maybe that would be for the best. Maybe walking away with her heart intact, or at least not completely destroyed, was worth more than $75 million. The board meeting took place in a conference room that felt designed for intimidation. 12 executives sat around a massive table, their expressions ranging from skeptical to openly hostile. Chairman Zhao occupied the head of the table, his disappointment in his son evident in every line of his face. Victoria Chan sat in the corner, a satisfied smirk playing at her lips. Elena sat beside Dominic, their thighs touching under the table, the only point of contact between them. She could feel the tension radiating from his body, could see the careful mask he'd constructed hiding any genuine emotion. Mrs. Zhao, the lead investigator began, a sharp-eyed woman who looked like she could smell lies from across the room. Thank you for joining us today. We understand this is uncomfortable, But given the concerns raised about your marriage's authenticity, we need to establish certain facts. I understand, Elena said, pleased that her voice remained steady. Let's start with how you met. Can you describe that first encounter? Elena glanced at Dominic, who gave an almost imperceptible nod. I was invited to what I believed was a networking event. When I arrived, I realized it was something else entirely. A gathering of women being evaluated as potential wives for Dominic. I was humiliated and angry. I accidentally dropped a champagne glass, and Dominic noticed me. He chose me that night. Chose you based on what criteria? You'd have to ask him. From my perspective, it seemed random. Lucky, I suppose, given my circumstances. The investigator's eyes sharpened. What circumstances would those be? Elena's throat tightened. This was the part she dreaded. My younger brother needed a kidney transplant we couldn't afford. I was desperate for money. The invitation suggested financial compensation for whoever was selected. I went because I had no other options. A murmur rippled through the board members. Victoria's smirk widened. Chairman Zhao's expression darkened. So you married my son for money, he said flatly. Initially, yes. Elena forced herself to meet his gaze. That was the arrangement. A contract marriage lasting 2 years in exchange for financial security. But what, Mrs. Zhao? The investigator leaned forward. Are you claiming the marriage evolved into something genuine? Yes. Over the past 6 months, we've built a real relationship. We share meals, conversations, our lives. We've become partners in more than just name. And yet, the investigator pulled out several documents. Your prenuptial agreement clearly outlines this as a business transaction. Specific terms for public appearances, living arrangements, even physical intimacy requirements. This doesn't sound like a love story, Mrs. Zhao. It sounds like prostitution with better paperwork. The crude assessment made Elena flinch, but she held her ground. The contract outlined how our arrangement began. It doesn't reflect where we are now. Convenient that this evolution happened just before our investigation. Tell me, Mrs. Zhao, how much of your $75 million payment have you received so far? None. The full amount is paid upon completion of the 2-year term. So you have significant financial motivation to convince us this marriage is real, regardless of the truth. Elena felt the trap closing around her. Every answer she gave could be interpreted as self-serving, every emotion dismissed as performance. She looked at Dominic, silently begging him to say something, to defend their relationship, to show these people that what they shared was real. But Dominic remained silent, his face carved from marble, his eyes fixed on some point in the middle distance. He'd retreated completely into himself, back behind the wall she'd spent months breaking down. Mr. Zhao, the investigator turned to Dominic. You've been remarkably quiet. Perhaps you can clarify the nature of your relationship with your wife. Dominic's jaw clenched. It's exactly as she described. We married under contractual terms. Over time, the relationship evolved. How romantic! Victoria interjected from her corner. Tell us, Dominic, do you love your wife? The room went silent. Every eye fixed on Dominic, waiting. Elena's heart hammered so hard she thought it might break through her ribs. This was the moment. This was where he could save them both, save everything, if he just found the courage to be honest. Dominic's hands, hidden under the table, clenched into fists. Elena saw the muscle jumping in his jaw, saw the war raging behind his carefully neutral expression. She reached for his hand, lacing her fingers through his, offering him her strength, her certainty, her love. Dominic started, then stopped. His hand squeezed hers so tightly it hurt. I care about Elena deeply. She's been an exceptional partner in every way our arrangement required. Elena felt something inside her shatter. Not I love her. Not even I'm falling for her. Just clinical acknowledgement that she'd fulfilled her contractual obligations. She pulled her hand away from his, and the loss of contact felt like amputation. I see, the investigator said, her tone suggesting she'd found exactly what she expected. Mrs. Zhao, perhaps we should speak with you privately. Board members, if you'll excuse us, I'd like to conduct the rest of this interview one-on-one. Elena stood on shaking legs, following the investigator out of the conference room. She didn't look back at Dominic. She couldn't bear to see his face, To see the relief that was probably there now that he didn't have to keep performing. The private interview was brutal. The investigator asked invasive questions about their intimate life, their daily routines, their private conversations. Elena answered honestly, describing mornings over coffee and evenings tangled together, inside jokes and quiet moments of connection. She laid bare her heart, her hopes, her stupidity in believing that a man who'd bought her could ever truly love her. When it finally ended, Elena felt hollowed out, exhausted. The investigator's expression remained neutral, giving nothing away. "Thank you for your candor, Mrs. Zhao. We'll present our findings to the board within the week. You're free to go." Elena returned to the conference room to find it empty except for Dominic, who stood by the windows overlooking the city. He didn't turn when she entered. "Well," Elena said, her voice dull with exhaustion and heartbreak, "that went about as badly as possible." "They'll rule against us," Dominic said flatly. "Force a divorce. I'll lose the company. You'll lose your payment. Is that really what you're concerned about right now? The money? The company? What else should I be concerned about?" Elena laughed, a bitter sound with no humor. "How about us? How about the fact that you just threw away something real because you were too afraid to admit it existed?" Dominic finally turned to face her, and the desolation in his eyes nearly broke her resolve to stay angry. "There is no us, Elena. There never was. Just a contract and two people pretending really well. You're lying. To yourself, to me, to everyone. You're lying because the truth terrifies you." Elena moved closer, close enough to see the barely controlled emotion flickering behind his facade. "I love you, Dominic. I love you so completely it feels like I can't breathe without you. And I think you love me too. But you're going to let fear destroy us, rather than admit something that makes you vulnerable." "Maybe that's exactly what I'm doing," Dominic said quietly. "Maybe I'm protecting us both from the inevitable disappointment when I fail to be what you need. Better to end this now on our terms than wait for me to destroy it slowly over time. That's the coward's way out." "I told you I was a coward." Elena felt tears streaming down her face again, but she didn't bother wiping them away. "If you really believed that, you wouldn't have built an empire from nothing. You wouldn't have fought your father for control of your own life. You wouldn't have arranged my brother's surgery without being asked. You're not a coward, Dominic. You're just terrified of being happy. Maybe happiness isn't for people like me. Then I feel sorry for you. Because you're choosing loneliness over love, isolation over connection, all because you're too afraid to risk being hurt." Elena moved to the door, then paused. "For what it's worth, these 6 months were the best of my life. Even knowing how they'd end, I wouldn't change them. I hope someday you can say the same." She left before he could respond, before she could see whether her words had any impact. She called for a car from the building's lobby, ignoring the curious stares from employees who'd probably already heard about the board investigation. The ride back to the penthouse was a blur. Elena packed methodically, folding expensive clothes she'd never wanted into suitcases she'd never needed before meeting Dominic. She took only what she'd brought with her originally: her old laptop, some books, her mother's necklace. Everything else was part of the illusion, part of the performance, and she wanted no reminders of the role she'd played. She was zipping the final suitcase when Dominic appeared in her doorway. He looked wrecked, hair disheveled, tie loosened, eyes red-rimmed like he'd been crying, though Elena had never seen him shed a tear. "Don't go," he said hoarsely. "Please, Elena. Don't leave. Why should I stay? You made it clear what I am to you. A contract. An arrangement. Someone who fulfilled their obligations adequately." "I lied." Dominic's voice cracked. "In that boardroom when Victoria asked if I loved you, I lied. Because the truth is so overwhelming it feels like it might kill me. Because loving you means accepting that someday I might lose you. And that possibility is more terrifying than anything I've ever faced." Elena's hand stilled on her suitcase zipper. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying I love you. Desperately. Completely. In ways that make no rational sense and scare me so badly I can barely function." Dominic moved into the room, his movements unsteady like he was navigating unfamiliar territory. "I'm saying I've loved you since you negotiated that contract with no leverage. I've loved you every morning watching you drink coffee with your feet tucked under you. I've loved you every time you laugh at my terrible jokes or challenge my decisions or fall asleep in my arms like you trust me completely even though I've given you every reason not to. Elena felt fresh tears starting, but these were different. These carried hope instead of despair. Then why didn't you say that when it mattered? Why did you let them think we were nothing? Because I'm broken and stupid and terrified. Because I thought protecting myself was more important than fighting for us. Because I'm everything you said. A coward choosing loneliness over risk. Dominic's hand shook as he reached for her. But watching you walk away made me realize that losing you through fear is exactly as painful as losing you through circumstance. Either way I lose. And I'd rather lose having fought for something real than lose having never tried. Dominic. I know I don't deserve another chance. I know I hurt you when I should have protected you. But I'm begging you, Elena. Stay. Fight this with me. Let me prove that I can be brave enough to love you the way you deserve. Elena searched his face, looking for any hint of manipulation or calculation. She found only raw, honest vulnerability. The very thing he'd spent his life avoiding. If I stay, things have to change. No more hiding behind contracts and arrangements. No more walls between us. Whatever you need. I need you to be honest. About your feelings, your fears, everything. I need you to let me in completely. I will. I swear it. And I need you to tell the board the truth tomorrow. All of it. How we started, where we are now, what we mean to each other. No performance, no calculation. Just honesty. Dominic paled slightly at that requirement, but he nodded. Okay. I'll tell them everything. And if they still force us apart, at least we'll know we tried. Elena stepped into his arms, feeling them close around her with desperate strength, feeling his face press into her hair, feeling the shuddering breath he took like a man who'd been drowning and finally reached air. I love you, she whispered against his chest. But if you hurt me like that again, I'm gone. No second chances. I won't. I promise you, Elena. I'll spend the rest of our lives proving that choosing you was the smartest decision I ever made. They stood there in her half-packed room, holding each other like lifelines, rebuilding what had nearly been destroyed. Outside, the city glittered with possibility. Inside, two broken people found the courage to heal together. The next morning, they returned to the board meeting holding hands. The executives looked surprised to see them together, clearly expecting the marriage to have fractured under pressure. Chairman Zhao's expression remained stern, but something in his eyes suggested curiosity about this development. Board members, Dominic began, his voice steady despite the tension Elena could feel thrumming through him. I need to make a statement before you deliver your findings. My wife and I would like to address the concerns about our marriage's authenticity. The investigator raised an eyebrow. The board has already reached a preliminary conclusion, Mr. Zhao. Nevertheless, I'm asking for the courtesy of being heard. Dominic's grip on Elena's hand tightened. 6 months ago, I entered into a contract marriage with Elena Rossi for cynical, calculated reasons. I needed a wife to satisfy board concerns and inheritance requirements. She needed money to save her brother's life. It was purely transactional. Everything Victoria alleged was true. Murmurs rippled through the room. Chairman Zhao leaned forward, his attention fully captured now. But something unexpected happened, Dominic continued. Elena became the most important person in my life. Not because she fulfilled contractual obligations, but because she saw past my carefully constructed walls and refused to accept my limitations. She challenged me, made me laugh, made me want to be better than I believed I was capable of being. And somewhere in the middle of pretending to be married, I fell completely in love with her. Elena felt tears threatening again but forced them back. This was Dominic's moment to be brave. She could be strong for him. Yesterday, when Investigator Chen asked if I loved my wife, I said I cared about her deeply. That was the biggest lie I've ever told. The truth is I love Elena more than I knew it was possible to love another person. I love her enough to risk losing everything I've built just to keep her in my life. I love her enough to stand here and tell all of you that yes, our marriage started as a fraud, but it became the most real thing I've ever experienced. Dominic turned to face Elena fully, his eyes bright with unshed tears. I love you, Elena Rossi Zhao. In front of these witnesses, in front of my father, in front of everyone who doubted us. I love you and I'm done pretending otherwise. If the board forces us to divorce, I'll fight it. If they strip me of my position, I'll build something new. But I won't lose you through cowardice ever again." The room was utterly silent. Even Victoria looked stunned by Dominic's declaration. Chairman Zhao stood slowly, and everyone's attention shifted to him. "Dominic," he said, his voice softer than Elena had ever heard it. "Do you remember what I told you when your mother died? When you were 16 and trying so hard to be strong?" Dominic's jaw clenched. "You said emotions were weakness. That successful men couldn't afford sentiment. I said that because I was wrong, because I'd spent my life believing the same thing, and it cost me the one person who truly mattered. Your mother died thinking I didn't love her because I was too proud to say the words." Chairman Zhao's eyes glistened. "I've spent 20 years regretting that silence. I won't let you make the same mistake." He turned to address the board. "Investigator Chun, what were your findings?" The investigator looked between Dominic and Elena, her expression thoughtful. "Based on my interviews and observations, I concluded that while the marriage did begin as a contractual arrangement, it has evolved into a genuine relationship. Mrs. Zhao's feelings are clearly authentic. My concern was whether Mr. Zhao reciprocated those feelings or was simply maintaining the pretense for professional reasons." "And now?" Chairman Zhao prompted. "Now I believe we have our answer. No one performs vulnerability that convincingly. Mr. Zhao's declaration was either genuine, or he's the most talented actor I've ever interviewed. Given his history of emotional guardedness, I'm inclined to believe the former." Chairman Zhao nodded slowly. "Board members, I move that we dismiss this investigation and recognize the Zhao marriage as legitimate." All those in favor? One by one, hands rose around the table. Even some of the skeptical executives seemed moved by Dominic's declaration. When the vote concluded, only 2 members opposed, Victoria and one of her allies. "Motion passes," Chairman Zhao announced. "The investigation is closed. Mr. Zhao retains his position as CEO. Mrs. Zhao, welcome officially to the family. I apologize for putting you through this ordeal." Elena felt Dominic's entire body sag with relief. She squeezed his hand, offering her support, her love, her certainty that they'd weathered the worst and emerged stronger. After the meeting, as they walked back to the car, Dominic pulled Elena into a quiet corner of the parking garage. "Thank you," he said quietly, "for not giving up on me, for seeing something worth saving even when I'd convinced myself there wasn't." "Always," Elena promised. "That's what love means. Staying through the difficult parts. Fighting when it's hard. Believing in someone even when they don't believe in themselves. I'm going to spend the rest of our marriage proving I deserve that faith." Elena smiled, reaching up to cup his face. "You already have. Now you just need to believe it." They kissed there in the dim parking garage, surrounded by concrete and flickering fluorescent lights, and it felt more romantic than any grand gesture could have been. Because this kiss wasn't performance or pretense. It was real, honest, and entirely theirs. 6 months later, Elena sat in the penthouse living room watching the sunset paint the city in gold and amber. Dominic was at the kitchen counter preparing dinner, something he'd insisted on learning to do properly after Elena commented that eating takeout every night wasn't sustainable. "Taste this," he ordered, bringing over a spoonful of sauce. Elena obediently opened her mouth, savoring the rich flavor. "Perfect," she declared. "You're becoming quite the chef." "I had motivation. My wife threatened to poison me with her cooking if I didn't take over kitchen duties. I said no such thing." "You implied it heavily." Dominic kissed the top of her head before returning to his cooking. "How was your day?" Elena curled deeper into the couch. "Good. Marco's latest tests came back clean. The transplant is still functioning perfectly. And I submitted my master's thesis today." Dominic turned, his expression lighting up with genuine pride. "Elena, that's incredible. Why didn't you tell me earlier?" "Because you had that merger presentation, and I didn't want to distract you." "Nothing about you is a distraction. Everything about you is the point." Dominic abandoned the stove entirely, coming to sit beside her. "We're celebrating tonight. Properly. We're already having dinner. That's just food. I'm talking about celebration. Champagne. Dessert. Things I do to you in our bedroom that make you forget how to form coherent sentences." Elena laughed, heat blooming in her cheeks despite everything they'd shared. Ambitious plans, Mr. Zhao? I'm an ambitious man, Mrs. Zhao. His expression softened. I'm proud of you. Everything you've accomplished while managing the chaos of being married to me. It's extraordinary. I had a good partner, Elena said softly. Someone who supported me even when he was learning how to express that support. Someone who got better at being a husband every single day. I'm still learning. But you make it easier. You make everything easier. Later, after dinner and champagne and the kind of celebration that left them both breathless and tangled together, Elena lay in Dominic's arms thinking about contracts and choices. Thinking about how she'd signed papers giving away 2 years of her life, and somehow ended up with forever instead. What are you thinking about? Dominic murmured against her hair. How lucky I am that I dropped that champagne glass. Luck had nothing to do with it. You were the bravest person in that room. The only one who saw through the performance to what it really was. A desperate man looking for someone to save him from himself. I didn't save you, Dominic. We saved each other. He tightened his arms around her, and Elena felt his smile against her temple. Then I guess we're even. The contract still had 18 months remaining on its original term. Neither of them mentioned it anymore. The $75 million sat in an account neither touched, irrelevant now to what they'd built. When the time came, they'd probably donate it to the children's hospital, completing the circle that had brought them together. But that was future Elena's problem. Present Elena was exactly where she wanted to be. In the arms of a man who'd learned to be brave for love, who'd chosen vulnerability over safety, who'd fought his own demons to become the partner she deserved. The city glittered beyond their windows, full of other stories and other struggles. But in this moment, in this room, two people who'd found each other through desperation and contract had discovered something neither expected. That love, when it finally arrived, was worth every risk, every fear, every moment of uncertainty. And sometimes, just sometimes, the coldest hearts could learn to burn brightest of all. And that's how $75 million became worthless compared to love. Sometimes the coldest hearts burn brightest. So tell me, could you have fought for someone too afraid to fight for themselves? Comment below, I want to know. If this story got you in your feelings, smash that like button right now. And if you're not subscribed yet, hit subscribe because next story is even more intense. See you in the next one.